What is going on, Metaverse? In this episode of Annie Knows, I'm pleased to be joined by a very special guest today, Kieran Warwick, shitposter extraordinaire, champion of EthLizards, the CEO of Illuvium, and really a very big reason of why I decided to make Web3 Gaming my personal crusade last year. Kieran, it's great to talk to you today. And aside from what's probably liquid coffee in your veins right now that's keeping you going, how are you doing overall?
Yeah, doing not too bad. It's been a pretty crazy ride since coming back from the conference. But I love chatting to you guys. I know how passionate you are about Illuvium. I know how excited you are. Most of you, we gave beta access, so you've been teased a little bit of the universe, and yeah, I'm just happy to jump on and talk to you, Annie.
Yeah, absolutely looking forward to it. And I think, one of the biggest topics that we've been talking about in the space for the past few weeks is really this concept of the IBG, or the Interoperable Blockchain Game. This is a term that I think you coined when Andrew was on the cast with TSG and Will and I a few weeks back. He mentioned you guys have been really talking about the branding of how we cast Illuvium when you're connecting all of these elements between the overworld, the arena, Illuvium Zero with the lands. So I think the term itself is brand new, but you guys have been working on building this for over a year and a half now. What are some of the big challenges that you're having to overcome to make that a reality?
There haven't actually been too many. So I would highlight two of them. The first one is cross-platform and utilizing two different engines. So Illuvium Zero is a mobile game that is being built on Unity, whereas the overworld and the arena games are being built on UE5. So there's a little bit of complexity there in making the seamless connection from the overworld, where you can travel into Illuvium Zero and then you can travel into arena. So that I guess is one challenge, but again, the game design team is already thinking up ways, and I think they'll overcome that pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Then the second one is the complexity that comes with our full vision that we have. The short term is obviously getting out these three games that we've been talking about: Illuvium Zero, Arena, and Overworld. All of that is coming in terms of at least an alpha or a beta form by the end of this year. And I say that because I want to give ourselves a ton of buffer. They're really, really close.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been a challenge to interconnect all of those. As you know, Illuvium Zero powers the entire economy across all of the games that we plan to build in the universe. Overworld is where you capture the assets that are usable in, again, all of the games across the universe. And so just connecting up those three games in a way where even Arena is basically the battle system that you use in the overworld, which is that's when the penny dropped for me. That's that first interoperability of two genres where you're all of a sudden in a creature capturer and then you're ported straight into an auto battle. And it's like, I love both of these games, but that was like instant, and that's when it really hit me. And I immediately, Aaron's been sick for a couple of months. Like, the guy just went ballistic, right? Like, he just went so hard, and it was a couple of unfortunate things that happened to him. It's actually, all three of us have now been in hospital at some stage throughout this journey.
Taking a physical toll.
But once I got him and sat him down and said, dude, like, I need to extract this vision out of your head, because I've just played it and I'm like, you're not putting down what's in your head here. Like, and he's like, I've been trying to tell you this for 2 years, right? Like, this is what keeps me up at night. I've got to build out 9 games that are all interoperable, all seamlessly connected, utilizing the same token, the same assets. Do you realize how complex that is? And I was like, 9 games. Sorry, what? Right? Like this is the, and again, like we tease things out and we talk all the time. We're brothers. We just talk shit and whatever. But yes, we've talked about other games, but the dude is doing it in his head, right? And not just in his head. He's got thousands and thousands of pages of game design documents where he's thinking about this 10, 15, 20-year vision of what if we brought all of these nostalgic games that we loved as kids, we brought them together in a new age, modern style of graphics, which is where Grant comes in, and then mash them all together. That is extremely complex. And I'm like, well, now you said it. So I'm going out there and I'm going to tell the world that this is what we're going to do. And that's when I realized this is a new genre. It's essentially a genre that mashes any amount of gaming genres together and connects them together. And so that's where we got the IBG term from.
Yeah, it's maybe somewhat akin to like a multiverse concept within the Illuvium landscape overall. When you talk about the challenges that Aaron's got with the design skills, that's actually the biggest concern and risk that I saw with this whole concept. So when we talk about intra-game balance of characters, and let's say you've got a Squiz on one side and he's got all this metadata around him for the auto battler and for the overworld, and then all of a sudden we move over into a racing game or a first-person shooter or something. You've got to make sure that you have an appropriate balance in that new game as well with him, and you want to make sure that he's got that same kind of feel and take on the character as you port him over into a new world. So what is the approach that you guys are taking? Will it be more, we'll create the additional metadata for a new title on the characters later on, or are we going to try and do some kind of balance where Squiz's speed is always a 12 and Ramfire's is a 20 or something to that effect?
Yeah, so the way that he explained it to me is that they'll always have the same stats. We can't go around saying that an asset is good in one game, but then it gets decreased or increased in another game. So we need to keep it balanced in the sense that a player owns an NFT, and therefore that NFT should be the same quality or the same power, if you will, across all of the different games. And so we put how we run the auto battler is how we would run the balancing in the racing game and pretty much every other game, where we put the characters through a simulator and it runs millions and millions and millions of times, and we optimize those stats so that every single character is balanced, right? So if you think about it, because we have this tiered system and stage system, as long as we keep that same system across the board, which we obviously are going to do, if you have a Ramfire, right, which is a tier 5 stage 3, that's one of our most powerful characters. When you go into the Mario Kart game, it doesn't necessarily need to even use the same stats, right? We can, like meaning the stats don't need to change, but they also don't need to be appropriate either, right? Whereas if you go into, say, a dungeon crawler, that's where they may need to be appropriate, right? Like when you're playing Mario Kart, every single character is balanced in the same way that they're all equal, right?
Yeah.
And that's
speed,
fine.
acceleration,
There's not like Ramfire can't be faster, his missiles can't be more powerful than say an Atlas with his water gun or on the back with his turrets or whatever. But at the same time, we want that with the Mario Kart style racer game, the cartoon racer, but we don't necessarily want that with maybe the dungeon crawler, right? Like if you have a Ramfire that's that tier 5 and it's stage 3, you should be able to take that in, and that should be more powerful when you're combining with your friends and you're going into those PvP raids. You want to be able to say, Jesus, we need Annie in this because he's got that ram fire, and the only way that we can beat this boss is if we have him playing with us today. So like, don't go to work today, dude. We've got a massive raid on. Let's go in. So there are some games where we will literally equalize the stats. And if you look at Arena, same thing, right? You can get a really powerful character that's the same character, right? You can find a squiz that's got super powerful stats, and then you can get really, really unlucky and get a squiz that's got terrible stats. That's just the randomized, and it makes it a lot more fun when you're capturing things. But when you go into the arena, the ranked mode, it's all equalized, right? We want it to be a level playing field. So there are some cases where games will need to have equalized stats, or essentially no stats at all. Just you have that character, you get that racing car. But then there's going to be other games where it is appropriate, and that's when those stats will not change, because we don't want someone to feel like they've gone out and they've got this really powerful character, but then they go into the space exploration game and all of a sudden their ship is terrible, because we've just changed it up on
balance issues. Yeah, that makes sense. So I really like the concept and the branding, because I think it very clearly illustrates what we're building, right? Interoperable blockchain game makes sense when you think about it. But I also am really excited for the time when we don't really have to talk about Web3 or blockchain games, that the default or the de facto approach for studios is going to be players will own the key assets anyways, because it's just the right thing to do. It's a better business model. And so, eventually I think that's going to happen. As you consider the space and the future and what games are developing now, how long do you think it's going to be before we really do away with talking about, oh, this is a Web3 game? It just kind of becomes the technology that's there that's enabling most of the new games that are coming out.
When we hit a point, so we call it an IBG, and obviously the technology behind it is blockchain. The reason we don't call it an interoperable crypto game is crypto has this like bad connotation. There's people that think, crypto is a scam and all that kind of stuff. Blockchain doesn't necessarily have that. We've got banking systems that have been using blockchains and ledgers for 10, 15 years now. You've got real estate systems that use blockchains.
Yeah, healthcare.
It's just a superior way to have a ledger and tracking system. We're seeing it used with jewels now, so you can track where a diamond or a very expensive deposit or whatever. And it just makes it safer for the consumer to be able to have something on an online immutable chain where you can track the exact movements of where things have gone. So I don't think there's anything bad about blockchain, right? And so that's why we're happy to use IBG as the term. In terms of when I think it's going to get to a stage where where we're not even using IBG and people are just like, this is just an interoperable blockchain game, I think it has to be when we have all genres a choice for gamers to go in and play a Fortnite style game, a tower defense style game, a dungeon crawler, battle royale, like all of these different, a racing game. Like once
dating simulator,
own your
right?
car in Need for Speed, you're not going back again, right? Like you think about that. You play those games. I played Need for Speed like all the way growing up. Then Need for Speed 5 comes out, Need for Speed 6 comes out, and you all of a sudden building up all your cars again, yet you've gone through all of these different races. It should just be a succession on Need for Speed 5 in 6, where you can build on that. And I shouldn't have to go and buy a new game that's going to cost me $100. I've already got the assets, right?
Yeah.
So I think once gamers actually see that blockchain gaming isn't just your really, really low quality indie games, it's going to change, right? And that verifiable ownership, that ability to sell and trade and own and earn, people don't regress. They don't go back, right? They're not going to say, all right, now sweet, we gave that a try and that was way better experience for the players, but for the developers, we didn't make as much money, so we're going to have to go back. That's not going to happen, right? There's too many teams like us that are building that have already accepted that our revenue model is completely different to what a traditional studios is. And it just so happens to be much, much, much better for the player and the investor. So both of those forces pushing against traditional gaming is going to change the scope of it. You just need to look, 5-10 years into the future.
Yeah. And for sure, I think the reason this is possible is 100% because from an economic model standpoint, you can have resellability and then take a small marketplace fee on the back end when your person that bought the asset the first time sells it to someone else, right? If you can't do that, you have to, as a content creator, like a game developer, you have to keep reselling new assets because you can't get effectively royalties on that initial creation. As soon as you have that marketplace structure in place, now all of a sudden you don't need to force someone to pay another $70 for the next version of Madden or 2K or whatever. You can just sell it once, and then the resellability, as long as you provide value for the assets, right, through new games and content creation beyond, whether it's expansion packs or whatever, and that gives you the revenue model that you actually need in this space.
Yeah, so and 100%, a sustainable economy is what we're all about and what we've been thinking about before even TGE, right? Like when we were first thinking, how do we keep our assets valuable over time? That's why we brought in sets, right? So you literally, after a certain amount of time, we're going to cut it off. You'll never, ever be able to get those assets again. Still, you'll be able to use them across they don't become obsolete. You can use them across all the games for the rest of the time, but there will be other people who go, okay, now set 2's out. Imagine if I had that one earth character or that one fire character or water character or nature character that maybe people thought was actually pretty lackluster in set 1. And so not many people caught it, right? So the idea of bringing in new characters every 12 months or so is the way that we keep them valuable. The fusing mechanism is the way that we keep them valuable. But this is all ancillary, right? This is all secondary to our primary focus, which is we're going to give you an extremely fun experience. If you go all the way through World of Warcraft, you get to level 60, you've grinded so many hours. Like I've been there, right? I've been there with multiple characters.
And that's twice,
right?
yeah, 3 times, 4 times, yeah.
And if you get to the end of that, you're right now, the expectation is, oh, well, I just got 10,000 hours of addictive, immersive fun. That's better than the real world. It's my escapism. It's how I talk to my friends, and it's my community. It's all of those things that are very valuable to humans. It's why 3.5 billion of us do game, right? But if at the end of it, it was easy and encouraged for you to be able to go onto a marketplace and say, hey, I'm actually done with this warlock. I want to sell it to someone. That would be just an added bonus to the fact that you just had 10 years of fun playing this game. That's what we're about. So it's twofold. Not only have we thought, yes, there are going to be extractors in our economy who come in and try and get as much yield and as much money as possible. We stop that through adding new sets, adding fusing, making the alluvial super unique and having different stats out there. So you're not just capturing a ramfire. There's 50,000 different ramfires out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you put a value on that? So yes, we have thought about all of the economic impacts of building a sustainable economy, but at the heart of it, it's about building a fun, immersive experience. That's the value that people really, really get out of playing our games.
Yeah. This was exactly the conversation I had with my arena partners in WoW. So I left as a guild officer and a WoW player earlier this year to really go full time into Web3 gaming, right? And it was a tough decision because I've been playing Classic for what 2-3 years now. You know, all the way through. This was not the first round that I played WoW either, and so making that decision to leave was difficult. And I had this discussion. Hey guys, I'm stopping. They're like, really? You spent all this time? And I said, yeah, because I think there's a reason that I shouldn't have to give it all up right now and just say totally sunk cost at this point, guys. Why should I not be able to sell my shaman to someone else and, liquidate my assets? I mean, as it was, I sold everything that I could in game and then just sent the gold to all my friends. But, there's nothing in it for me at that point. It's just really wanting to support, my community and buddies that I played with for a long time. Yeah.
Unless you want to go onto black markets and now, people talk about Web3, they're scams and it's dangerous and, you can lose your money. Think about what people did in World of Warcraft.
Bro, I sold gold back in 2007. Original, OG, WoW times. Dude, for sure.
People I say this, I went out. It was when I first started working at Harvey Norman, which is a retailer that sells computers. I got into WoW and I bought a computer the next day. I was that addicted. I was just like, oh my God, I need to just build up this character. Back then, there were news stories, people were literally meeting up in an internet cafe to make sure that you can't keep your kid, because people would go to eBay, they would sell their character, and then they would just keep the secret key and they would just rug it from it, right? They would just rug it back, sell it again, rug it back. eBay then caught onto it and started building in protection mechanisms. But it got to a point where people were going to an internet cafe, so they knew, okay, you're a real person. I'm watching you click that button, and here's $500 cash for that character, and I've got the keys. I know that I'm safe. That's insanity, right? But you're not going to stop human nature from doing things like that, right? There's no point in stifling people and players like that. And that's why I think if there were good games that were playable, and I mean not just alphas and betas and stuff, really, really good games that gave you that ownership that existed today, it would already have happened. Players wouldn't be going back. I wouldn't be having to sit here talking about it. I would be competing with Web3 games that have already brought over hundreds of millions of players, because they're not going to regress and go back and say, actually, you know what, you're right. Let's start giving all our money back to the developer. It's the game has changed, and this is the future. And once we see multiple genres and multiple titles come out from really, really smart developers that have researched their tokenomics, so they're sustainable, they've got a good game design, they've got great graphics and an in-depth team, it's game over.
No, and that's the part that has me so excited right now, is there are so many good teams that are actually building in this space. On the board behind me, I'm working through a tokenomics review for one of our mutual friends' projects, and really, I can't wait to see what's going to come in the next few years. One of the flip sides of that, though, is there's got to continue to be talent in the space from a game dev standpoint, from the asset and art design and so on. How has the market for talent in the gaming space and Web3 gaming specifically shifted in the last couple of years? I would imagine it's pretty different now from when you started building out your team.
So the first, I think about this now, right? Like, and obviously I don't know every single game, but there were maybe in our pitch deck, I struggled. I think I had to put CryptoKitties in there, which is not really a game, right?
Yeah.
It was like Axie, CryptoKitties, and I think there was one other one that was in there, right? Now, Axie didn't have a single game developer of AAA quality, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can tell by the game that they built.
Yeah.
Amazing technology, extremely talented when it came to being able to realize the power of NFTs.
Mm-hmm.
I can't thank them enough, because if it wasn't for them, I don't think I would have gone to Grant, who I actually think is probably the first mainstream person that's capable of AAA, whether they be an artist or a developer.
Mm-hmm.
He was probably the first one to come into GameFi. And it took me 2 weeks to convince that guy. He'd never built a game before. It was always something that we'd spoken about growing up. 2 weeks. I can literally show you text conversations, because that's where it started. We didn't have a Discord. He didn't have a phone. He used to use a fucking iPad, which is the weirdo that he is. So if it wasn't going over to his house, which I ended up doing, it was texting him and being like, on Messenger we used to use, right? So I could go back, and I probably will now that I'm thinking about
this.
Yeah,
this would be good.
I'll show you some, I'll put it in the Discord. I'll have to maybe delete some stuff, because we talk pretty crazily, but it was ridiculously hard. What did I have to show him? I had Axie.
Yeah,
I said, hey,
Axie and CryptoKitties to say this is what I mean.
He's like, dude, I'm not fucking with this at all. Like, no, not a chance. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't work 15 years of my life with some of the largest brands in the world to become one of the best CGI modelers in the world, to go and do some bullshit crypto scam with you. Not happening. And I was like, it's not going to be like that, blah, blah, blah. And then it snowballed, right? So that first, you're right. The 2 years ago, it was extremely hard. Roger, another one, super skeptical. He's like, dude, like we caught him in an outsource time. He'd done a whole bunch of stuff for some crazy studios out there and some really big games. But he was also like, I mean, I'll do it because it's just you're promising me money.
I'll get paid for it.
Yeah, I'm not joining full time.
I'm not signing my name on this, right?
Yeah. Aaron didn't. I think Aaron at the start was actually like, I reckon I can convince him that we just build a mainstream game. If the guy can go out and raise money, I'll just take that money and just build a mainstream game, because that's what he had wanted to do for like 10 years. So I think he was genuinely thinking as well, this is just bullshit. And so, yeah, it was extremely hard to get that first core group of 20 devs and artists to show them. And luckily, I'm really, really good at convincing people of things, right? It's one of my skills that I utilized at the start to say, like, no, I'm telling you, I can see this. I know where this is going. Don't think about what's in front of you here and these graphics that look like they're 20 years old and this shitty gameplay that looks like it could be built in 2 weeks or whatever. Think about what it would be with your guys' ability, your talents. And that's when Grant started thinking, okay, well, I can go AAA. Right? Like, I wanted to do that all my life. I'll go AAA. I'm the only one who can prove that. Look at my fucking reel. You can talk shit all you want, but I've got the reel. And I was like, all right, I've got him. And then once I had him, I went to Aaron and I was like, let's do it. We got Aaron on board. Then the first 20, Grant was able to go out to a bunch of friends of his. Same thing, getting Dimitri on. I was like, dude, he was like, yep. I'm in. Now, the guy was working for Cream Studios. It's one of the biggest studios in Australia. They make world-class ads for huge brands, Mercedes, BMW, Kellogg's, like just crazy brands. The guy was at the top of that studio, and I'm here saying, hey, jump over to crypto. And he's like, you're on crack. Like, I'm not doing that. Right. And so it was hard at the start. I know I've rambled on a lot about this, but it means a lot to me, you know, because it was one of the biggest hurdles. And it's the reason that you see so many games go out there and go, oh, no, I'm not putting my team on the website. That's not because you don't want people to go and poach your guys. That's because you don't have that team that you're talking about. Because I know firsthand how hard it was to be able to recruit these people. But once you get that core 20, 30 people and you start tapping into their networks and you say, now you've worked with, you know, 300, 400 other AAA artists and devs, go out to them and tell them that this is real now. And we had enough substance. Nowadays, you know, fast forward 2 years, it's still tough. You know, devs are still tough to get, but they see our team and we show them like, okay, well, you know, these guys are ridiculously high caliber that have built games across the board, have animated movies and done sound on movies that are all across Hollywood. Why do you think they're here? Do you think they're part of some elaborate scam? And so our recruiters are very good at saying like, you know, this is real and this is the future of gaming. And yeah, now it's easy. But I still think for other studios out there that weren't as ferocious as us at that beginning point to just get to that tipping point of where you can really prove to devs that what you're building is real, I think it would still be a struggle for them.
That makes sense. So one of the challenges you're going to have, I've no doubt, is as more of the content comes out, we get into the overworld, the game goes live next year, you're going to have the opposite challenge where everyone that's trying to get into the space, that they need the next lead dev or lead game designer, they're going to be looking for the folks in your studio because they've done it, right? They've proved that it can work. How does that, you know, how do you approach that as a leader, recognizing that, you know, part of the risk of being one of the first entrants to the space puts a target on your back because people are going to want your people because they're the ones that have shown it can work.
100%. And, you know, that's where Danny, myself, Grant, we've run businesses before. We know how to retain people. Aaron as well, very good at just being real, right? Like saying, you know, we are here for the long term. We have a vision that a lot of times, and I spoke to Roger about this. Roger's our lead concept artist. He said, oh, like, you know, concept artists are usually the first ones to go because what happens is we run out of concepts. And I was like, dude, are you crazy? Running out of concepts means me running out of ideas like Illuvium and the land game that we came up with, and Aaron running out of new games to build. Like, I was like, we're going to need more concept artists, not less. And it's those conversations where in a traditional studio, they say, okay, you know, this game's done now. We're going to publish this. We're going to start building another game, maybe in a couple of years that we'll call you up. And they're very used to just being kicked to the curb and saying, we don't need you anymore. And I was like, do you know how many partnerships I'm not saying this to you, I'm saying this to Roger still. I'm like, okay, first of all, forget the games, forget all that other bullshit. Do you know how many partnerships that Lauren is talking to, potential partners that Lauren is talking to now? You know how you built that thing called Illuvium and you designed these collections now? He's now utilizing that as a mechanism to go to these big in real life brands and say, hey, do you want your own Illuvium collection? And what does that mean? We need to build concepts for, and like the concept team, they're also the ones that do the NFT art. So those partnerships, And so when we're talking to these brands and you're thinking, okay, the apparel that they use, or like the tattoos that they have, if they're a famous person, and I'm not going to go into who we're talking to and what brands we're talking to, but who's going to do that if we get rid of the concept artists? And Roger's like, yeah, right. I'm like, it's been 2 years and you still question whether, like, do you think I'm crazy, or do you not realize that I'm thinking 10 years ahead? And I know for a fact that not only are there new games that are going to be coming out, Aaron is building those in his head now. There's 50 other things that we're going to do to generate revenue across the board that require concepts. If we go out to these guys, a new battle board, for example, like skins for the auto battler, if we want to go out to, and we've literally just, like, one of the most exciting partnerships that I think we're going to be able to close, and we're deep in talks with them, is building out a concept for a battle board that just, it'll blow people's minds. It'll be like, holy God, how did they get such an established brand that has been around for that long to now have that as a skin? If you want to play your auto battles, boom, you're doing it on this new battle board. And I'm like, okay, let me just go ask the animators, because we're going to need them for the rest of the time. Obviously not your concept artist. And he's like, what? No, we have to do that. And I'm like, oh, really? That's interesting. You know, so there we give, going back to that original question, we show the team mega loyalty, right? They also see that the founders work stupid hours, like to the point where it's like, how can they sustain that? And sometimes we can't, right? Like sometimes we literally burn out. I've said, back, I don't know, 12 months ago, I had to just go, I'm going 12 days to Mexico. I'm out. Don't talk to me. Like, I'm literally done. And, apart from that, we work incessant hours that are probably not healthy. And it shows the conviction that we have. And regularly, we get told by core contributors that this is the best place we've ever worked. We're super transparent with them. We've said from day one, and however you want to work, whenever you want to work, and wherever you want to work, as long as you get the job done, do whatever you want. We have some freaks who can literally do things in like an hour. And then it's like, okay, well, you just did 5 things in an hour that would normally take 3 people 2 days. Go and have a holiday. Great. We don't care, right? And so that sort of realism and transparency builds such a high resilience in our staff and a retention rate that we've had 2 people poached, and they were both from marketing, right? So I'm not worried about these big studios coming in. Actually, one was from game design as well, which kind of pissed me off. But at the same time, the offer that they gave him was just outrageous. And I was like, you know what? For your own self, just go and do that. But do I have my do I have my thoughts on whether it's going to be a good long-term move? Yes, but I totally get it. And again, that's the type of guys we are. So building it up to a 200-person studio in 18 months and having 2-3 people be poached, I'm not worried at all. Plus, there's the incentive of the tokens that we gave them early on. So they're all locked in for the long term. And it's really not something that I worry about. I've got way bigger stuff to worry about than that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when we think about the games that are building now, a lot of the concepts are having to be invented for the first time, right? And whether it's things like, your work on the Illuva decks, it's obviously the whole game modes themselves, you're having to build it from scratch. I think that the game studios that are going to last are the ones that are able to find good ideas from other projects and then quickly iterate on them. This was actually one of the big discussions Santiago and I had a few weeks ago, that ability to shift and pivot when you recognize something isn't working, is critical in any industry, but especially one where your first pass at tokenomics or game design or integration with the blockchain might need to be adjusted. What are some ideas that you've been able to look at and find in other projects, whether they're DeFi protocols or Web2 games, that you could apply into Illuvium to make your product better?
Governance is one. We literally stole that from Synthetics. I actually got the contributor, Andy, who's now gone off and built his own protocol, Scalene. I literally secretly got him to build out our governance model. And obviously, I was a big part of that, but we took their model. It was tried, it was tested, it was 3 years old, and it worked, right? The revenue distributions model came from a random, I tried to go, we didn't know where that came from. Like, there was so much shit that got built and designed early on from a DeFi standpoint, from a game design standpoint. Sometimes we sit around and we're like, who actually came up with that or whatever? I traced it back to a protocol that I was like degenning in that lasted like a month. And they basically said all protocol fees are going to be sent back to people that are staked in the protocol. And it would have just been, and that has been iterated on massively. We had things like flash pools and stuff like that got added to our staking. But like initial ideas that we get from other protocols are then iterated on and built up to be better, more sustainable. And so we've used many examples. They're just two off the top of my head. But this open source Web3 ecosystem is so much different to the closed doors building of your Web2 juggernaut companies. Imagine if you opened up Google's R&D compartment, right? Like a department. Let's say you open that up. Think about the things that they are building. Think about like, it would be ridiculous, right? Now, they don't want to do that because that goes against their business model. They do everything they can to protect that. Every single staff member is under an NDA. If they go against that, they will literally take them in a large scale lawsuit. And Web3 is not about that. It's about fully open source protocols. You can fork code really quickly.
Yeah.
We were able to build out, another example is Forge. That was built based upon ALAN protocol, which again was another one of my brother's protocols, and he wasn't too happy about that one. But we just went and did it, and because there was a basis there, we were able to build it in like 4 or 5 weeks. And now we've got this protocol that's sitting there where we can have investors be able to, retail investors be able to invest at the same level as institutional investors. And there's going to be many things in the future where we utilize and iterate on and, retrofit them to be better for our style of protocol. But yeah, it's probably one of the best and biggest advantages of Web3 over Web2.
No, I love that. And the open building in public concept is just awesome. One of the things that you said was really interesting, because governance is an area that I'm particularly passionate about in the Web3 gaming space, because I think, as you mentioned, the first version of governance that we saw with Illuvium and a lot of other projects is based almost exclusively on like a DeFi backbone, if you will, where you're looking at it purely from an investing standpoint. You're focused on maximizing returns for the initial investors and then people that get in afterwards. One of the challenges is that when you're building out a gaming either platform or product, you've got different stakeholders and constituents than you do in a DeFi protocol. And I'm going to throw up on the screen with us one of the images that I generated for one of my recent videos, which is a proposal for adjustments to governance structures. And I think you actually triggered some of my thought process in this months ago. This is probably 4 or 5 months ago in one of I think it was an AMA on Twitter, when you talked about governance version 2. And we chatted about it for a bit at that time. The big issue that I think I see with the governance structure is it's entirely focused on the economic pillar, if you will, today, right? The challenge is that you need the stakeholders that are community members, whether they're influencers or guilds or just the players themselves, and you need those that are focused on the gameplay, whether they're professional gamers like a Frobe or Zeptile or some of these guys, or they're just new players to the game that need to make sure making it simple and easily understood is something that they can focus on. So, this is one of the ideas I've got. I think you have some really good ideas on the governance V2. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you see that evolving in the gaming sector specifically.
Yeah, so it's in my head. I've had this. I've been talking about this as you say for, I don't know, probably over a year now, and it's just been one of those things where I'm passionate about it, but things that work right now, like our governance works in the sense that we don't have the game out yet. So V2 is fairly critical once the game launches. But again, I'm wearing a lot of hats at the moment in terms of, being the acting CMO, being the CEO. There's a lot of other stuff that, I've got to get done. And being able to put down, so the model that you just showed is pretty close to the idea that was in my head. I've got two more subcommittees that I think we need to add to that. One of those is legals. And again, this is, we've had probably 3 or 4 different lawyers from different continents, I'd say, different jurisdictions that have different legislation. Imagine how powerful that would be to have a subcommittee that talks to the main council, and we can get an IIP where someone goes, and a lot of these IIPs come from council members or core contributors. But imagine if you then open it up, not only do you go from only having 5 people making decisions, you go to having potentially 25 plus people making decisions. So you've got that influencer coverage, you've got that tokenomics, economics coverage, you've got the community coverage, you've got legals coverage, and you build it out to a point where all of those guys and girls are sitting there, and it's their job to formulate improvement proposals that then go up to a main council that can deliberate on that, and not just deliberate from a single person, from literally experts across, North America, Europe, Australia, Asia, and you've got all of these guys that then formulate this one IIP that has recommendations and feedback and edits to say, hey, this is what we should do from a legal standpoint when it comes to what is a DAO, and should we create a separate company that holds the IP, and how do we, all of these different, how do we deal with taxation and stuff like that? We don't have that right now, right? If I went to the current council and I said, hey, we're talking about how we deal with IP within the DAO, that was a conversation that took, our lawyers and us 4 or 5 months to deal with. We ended up coming up with this novel concept, which essentially allowed the IP to not be owned by the core contributors, but to be owned by the DAO. But it was freakishly hard to come up with that concept. If we had 5 legal experts that were running that and talking to our lawyers directly, plus using the core contributors like myself and Danny, that process probably would have been optimized and done a lot quicker than what it was. Plus, it speaks to the decentralized model of, it wasn't just Danny and myself talking to our lawyers and coming up with this concept. It was literally a community-driven committee that is voted in by 200,000 people that are distributed across, 50, 60 different countries in the world. That's really what governance should be. And that's a much more effective model. And yeah, so what you showed is very similar to what's been in my head for a long time. And Rich is actually doing a really good job on this, and I'm super proud of how far he's come in just the last 6 months of being with us, because he presented what has been in my head, and I said, look, there's going to be some edits to this. We need to add a couple more committees and whatever, but by far and large, this is really good. And I just, I was super impressed. So yes, that type of governance model is definitely required. But again, we're getting pretty close to it. And I said it needs to be implemented in this latest epoch, which is coming to an end very soon. I think it's like 6 or 8 weeks away now. So yeah, the idea is we get that in and start building on that. But also at that point, I want to recommend that instead of it being a 6-month epoch, we bring it out to a 12-month epoch. And instead of just having a form where I think, Richard's response to why he should be on the council originally before he became a core contributor was Kieran Knows, right? And it's like, what the fuck is that, mate? Like that's not it. We should be taking this seriously. These guys get paid. I want to build a formalized process where it's similar to going for a job, right? Where you have to actually put in an application. You have to, do a video application where we can get on the phone with you. We know who you are. We know we can actually qualify that you do have that expert skill set that we require for each subcommittee. And therefore, if we go through that rigorous process, the community should feel better in knowing, okay, well, let's put them on for a 12-month period. And, again, there's fallbacks in place where if someone starts doing crazy stuff and nefarious stuff and whatever, damaging to the protocol, we can remove them and vote someone else back in and start that process. But we don't, like, governance shouldn't take away from our main vision of what we need to build. And that's why I haven't sat down and spent the 2 weeks that it really deserves of me going, okay, how do we build this out in the exact way? Aaron doesn't have time to do it, and Danny doesn't have time to do it. So having Rich step up and really start looking at this in a serious way is good to see and really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the topics that you shared a lot is how angel investors and VCs that have supported you guys have been really essential to the project's success as a whole. And thinking about the governance concept, someone like Santi being on the council for so long, I think is a big part of that. Frequently, you're on the other side of the table too, right? So whether it's an EthLizards with us or it's as an investor yourself, you see kind of the reverse nature of that as an advisor to projects. What's the most important thing that an early stage investor can bring to a founder?
Networking. That's the biggest thing. So what Santiago did that and it was unparalleled compared to a lot of the other investors and angel investors that we had. Santiago saw what we were building. He got the vision immediately. He knew that he was dealing with a Warwick, which they're going to be a little bit crazy. They're going to say some seriously crazy shit on Twitter. They're going to get into wars with people. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but he knew that it always comes from a place of passion. And so he went all in on helping us. And that sort of networking is what I bring to the table when I'm helping a project. I recently, I don't even know if I should mention this, but I recently became an investor and an advisor in a protocol called Dive. Now, this is an NFT shorting platform that's coming out. EthLizards are in the process of getting into the pre-seed, so there's a little bit of alpha for you there. These guys was super passionate. It sort of reminded me of myself when I started. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew that I was going to spend whatever it took in hours to figure things out, right? And that's what Santiago realized. And to repay me for that passion and that commitment to the investment that he made, he also did the same and went out and got us 10, 15 different investors, probably 30 different influencers that we could speak to. He got us audit companies to work with at discounted rates. And that's what I try and do as an added value investor. Now, obviously, I'm super busy, but it's a passion of mine. It's almost a hobby of mine to be able to do that. And I'm fortunate enough to now be able to go out to other DeFi founders who can bring serious value add like they did to us and say, hey guys, we're doing it all again. So EthLizards was one of those. Fancy Games was one of those. And I know that's a sleeping giant. Those guys are starting to think about different revenue models. They're always talking to me. I might not be as vocal about them, but they're still building, and they've got like 60 people in their team now. And now this next one that I've worked with is Dive. Their raise hasn't even been announced, but if you read between the lines, a lot of these people are about to jump in, along with the EthLizards. And that's my way of giving back to the ecosystem that was so good to us. And I want to become like Santiago in that sense of a value add investor that holds on to the token. I'm not here to dump things. I'm not here to it's a passion, right? It's why I said in the very beginning, I don't want to earn a cent off EthLizards. I'm probably 300K in with EthLizards in terms of buying them up, giving them away to celebrities and stuff like that. But it's my way of saying Illuvium has been supported by so many different DeFi groups out of there, EthLizards included. I need to then give back to the system that helped me get into the position that I'm in.
And that ethos, I think, pervades Web3 and Web3 gaming too. A lot of the founders that I work with, they're very focused on that too. They want this rising tide to lift all boats concept to work, and it's not a antagonistic, competitive only nature and spirit behind it.
Yeah. Even though it sometimes might look like that, I do call out projects whenever I know and get a sense that, hey, this is just a little bit of vaporware. The person, the founders or whatever might be able to talk the talk, but let's really look under the hood. And Santiago is very, very good at that as well. I've had situations where I was going to go all into a project, and because I don't have as much time to do the DD that he does, it's not, he's probably not as vocal as I am in terms of, going out and saying like, this is
public
bullshit.
Statements, maybe. Yeah.
But he doesn't invest. He goes, sorry, I've done a bit of research and this is not what you think, so yeah.
That makes sense. So speaking of investing and building, a lot of the dialogue in the past few days has been around additional capital raises. I know we've talked about sort of the bear market and timing being a challenge for Illuvium. One of the big questions is, how would a capital raise actually work? So could you walk me and our listeners through, if we were to do an additional raise for Illuvium, what would that look like in terms of the ILV tokens and the vault and treasury and so on?
Sure. So there's two ways that we can do it. We can do it through Forge. The source of the raise is the tokens that we have in the treasury. So they always had two purposes. One was for revenue distributions. And when we were first building our tokenomics, I even think there's a bunch of investors in either the pre-seed or even as far as the seed that got a deck that said that the treasury only has 10% of the tokens. It was very late in the piece that I went, you know what? I think it would be a good idea to take 5% out of the yield and put that back into the treasury. So we have in our kitty the ability, if whatever happens, we need to do another capital raise, we can draw down on those tokens. Now, the method, there's twofold, right? I tried to go out and get investment back, I don't know, 14 months ago now in the peak of the bull market. We had people we had VCs that were looking to throw in $50 million plus. Like it was an insane amount of money. I wanted to raise $1 million more than what Axie did just to antagonize them. And I was gung-ho about it, right? I'd had 50, 60 conversations. What stopped me was the not having the community involved. And so I went to Kane and I told him about, my thoughts and like why I can't press the trigger on this raise. And he was like, that's a pretty sound reasoning. You're valued at 19 billion right now. You're saying that you think you can do this capital raise at 7 billion valuation, which is double the largest game at the time. It was a huge, huge thing to be able to go and do that. But it meant that the community were buying in at $1,900 a token, and institutional investors were buying in at $700 a token. It still doesn't feel right to me, right? And that's when I went to Kane, and he was like, well, I've got ALAN protocol, and there wasn't enough features in that at the time for us to just be able to say, and in fact, I did pitch ALAN protocol 3 or 4 times to investors. And because it was such a new concept, because it wasn't our protocol, it sort of wigged out investors. And they were like, wow, can we just buy the tokens like we normally would?
Right.
And so we went back to the drawing board. And this is what pisses me off about some community members when there was some guy who put in the Discord the other day who was like, hey, show that you're DAO first. You got to walk the talk. And if you talk the talk, you gotta walk the walk. And I'm like, dude, we literally lost a $300 million capital raise because I decided that it was not okay to do a raise that didn't include the community. Now, it's not that person's fault. It's not anyone in the community's fault that the bear market came and it took us 3 or 4 months. It was right around the time of the hack that happened. So we had different priorities. We didn't think we needed to raise. We still had $40 million in the bank. And so it's super, super frustrating to see comments like that when it's like, all I do is think about the fairness and the ability for the community to get involved like institutionals. I really shouldn't be saying this because we're in the middle of a capital raise, but I very much love our community more than a institutional VC, right? Like that's proven across many things that we've done, and me personally that I've done over the last 2 years, and that's just more my ethos. And so we can use Forge, or in the case that I want to go to, that I want to use now, is just a quick, fast raise where we use some treasury tokens, we get it done so Aaron and the rest of the team feel comfortable that we have enough runway. My risk profile, I wouldn't do a raise right now, right? But it's my job to ensure that we have enough runway, and I promised the other founders that I would never let us get into a position where we could be in trouble. Now, I don't think that. However, if there was some crazy 3-year bear market and we weren't able to release any products and we had no revenue, Illuvitar's wasn't coming, revenue generation from Illuvium 0 wasn't coming, and the fucking world blew up, then yes, maybe we would need to do a capital raise. But it's not a unilateral decision that I'm able to make. And so I went to the council and I said, look, we can open up Forge. That fucked us last time. People were talking about, no, that's too cheap, that's too expensive, all this bullshit. It starts discourse that then derails me from being able to go out and pitch. And I don't want to get into a situation again where we're looking down the track in 3 months, 6 months, and people are like, well, why didn't you raise at the current market price if all of those terrible apocalyptic things happen, which again, I don't think it is, but are we really going to care if we went and sold, a bunch of tokens out of the treasury to give ourselves another 15, 20, 25 months runway that ensures no matter what, we can build out this stream when we know that all we need in the treasury is 10% of the tokens? That is more than enough to keep us running in perpetuity for operations, marketing, staffing costs, like way, way, way more than enough. So that's my reasoning for doing that. I didn't just decide this myself. I went to the council. I told them about it. We discussed it in the last meeting, and they said, "You're right. Just go out and do it. Do it now and get it done, and then everyone will forget about it." But I take comments to heart sometimes, and especially when people question things that I've literally done the opposite. My actions are the opposite of what their antagonistic comments suggest. And I get that I antagonize people, but I will genuinely only do it when they've demonstrated a lack of something. Right? I'm not going to go and antagonize someone who's demonstrated that they are transparent, that they do think of the community. They do always build things. Like, we literally built a protocol for the community to be able to go into this. So to suggest that we're, not DAO first can just get fucked, basically, to excuse my language. But I feel that's how I feel about it, right? I feel very passionate about it.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense. And part of the challenge is there's only so much content you can put in a Discord chat window, right? And some of these are very complex topics, and it's easy to ask the question, or you just see a quick Twitter post, and all of a sudden you can make up all kinds of stories about why something is going on, or how you think it's going to play out. And I think this is the reason why being able to access you directly and ask these questions is helpful for the community to understand the reasoning. So really appreciate that transparency. And this is one of the big advantages of building in Web3 is if this was a decision that shareholders were having to learn about in a Web2 gaming studio, if you got Ubisoft or Microsoft or someone, their founder's not telling you jack about what's going on for a decision like this, that you have no transparency. You're just buying the share and holding that it's working. At least in this case, you have a chance to get some answers and understand what the logic is. And if you decide for whatever reason you're not behind the decision or the approach, you can sell the tokens easily, right? I mean, that's certainly everyone's choice, and everyone has to make that call for themselves.
100%. You asked the question specifically. I've been doing many AMAs over the past 4 or 5 days. I've mentioned it in most of them just purely because it's something that we're doing. I mentioned, right. I've talked to our team about this of 200 core contributors. There's so many of them that are embedded in the community. If I was sitting here trying to keep this under wraps, then I'm doing an absolutely terrible job, to be honest. Yeah. But it's not like that. But I'm not going to make the same mistake that I did last time. Once we talk about this mega raise that we're going to do, once the market recovers, which it will, it always does. Again, not financial advice, but this is not my first rodeo in crypto. I've been here for nearly 8 years now. And these things are cycles. Once it comes back and we've shown that we've got 3-4 games out, we've got revenue coming in, we will do a mega raise and we will use the Forge, hopefully, right? Like, we tried to use the Forge. We told people that unlocks are going to happen. We've researched it. We know what we're doing. And the community got behind it and said, no, we don't want them to be able to sell those tokens to another. Like, the reason we built Forge was so that we could stop sell pressure from VCs. We literally told VCs that were in a really bad place. There was the Celsius blow up. There was the
Terra Luna and
Terra Luna
Three
issue.
Arrows. Yeah.
That there were serious flow-on effects from that. And we had some VCs reaching out to us saying, you're the only token that's performing like 40, 50x. Like, we have to use you as a cushion. Otherwise, there's going to be some issues. We knew that going into it, but we can't go out into the community and say, hey, I mean, I did do it, but I probably shouldn't have done it, because, we obviously didn't name any names. But again, that speaks to the transparency where I'm like, guys, I know this shit is about to go down. We have a mechanism here that basically silo these tokens, sell them to other people, lock them up again, and we won't have this downward pressure from the selling off of the tokens. And the community decided that they knew better than all of the knowledge that myself and Danny and the team had. And they said no to Forge. And so here we are. People say, you're not a DAO. Well, if it was my decision, I would say, get fucked. We are definitely doing this. I know it's going to make sure that our token price stays more stable. You don't know what you're talking about, but that's not how a DAO works. We have to use the council, and the council decided to vote that down. So please refrain from telling me that we're not running a DAO here, speaking to the community, obviously not you, Annie. But I've had 5 hours sleep in the last 3 days, and I'm getting a little bit fed up when I see nonsensical comments like that are there to trigger me. It's like, if you believe in this product, if you believe in this vision, then we're not sitting here making decisions centrally. There's been many, many, many examples of that. So just try and settle down on the antagonistic comments that make no sense.
Mm-hmm. I certainly understand, and really that access again is a double-edged sword, right? Being fully transparent means that by definition, people are going to see a lot more than they normally would, and everyone's got opinions in any market, but especially here. Kieran, thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to chatting with you again in the future.
No worries. Thanks, Annie. I'll come on anytime. You're a legend.
Absolutely. Take care, mate.
Bye.